All right, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive into, Donald Trump and Greenland.
Ah, yes.
It's a story that just keeps coming back.
It really does. And we have a fascinating mix of sources here. We have, personal notes,
Yeah.
news articles, historical analyses.
Yeah, we've really tried to pull from all these different perspectives to try to get a handle on this because it's a very strange story.
It is. And I think, what's really intriguing here is how this goes beyond just a real estate tycoon, wanting to buy an island.
Right.
Trump's actions and the reactions they've provoked, they offer a glimpse into a much bigger picture, the Arctic's growing importance.
Yes.
And global power dynamics and the scramble for resources.
Yeah, and it's interesting you should say that because I remember back in 2019 when this first kind of came on the radar.
Right.
A lot of people were just like, oh, there's Trump again,
Another one of his...
Yeah, exactly. It was just like another, outlandish, Trumpian kind of thing.
Yeah.
But fast forward, we're here in 2025 and it's really escalated. I mean...
Absolutely. This past January, Trump went beyond simply expressing interest. He publicly declared that U.S. control of Greenland was an absolute necessity for national security.
It's not just, we'd like to have it.
Right. It's not just desirable, but an absolute necessity.
A necessity.
And to really hammer that home, Donald Trump Jr. made a very public visit to Greenland in early January.
And that really stirred the pot.
Oh, yeah.
Because, the reactions in Greenland were mixed.
Of course.
Some people welcomed the attention.
Right.
Others saw it as a power play. Some were just confused.
Yeah.
But it kind of begs the question, what's behind this renewed push for Greenland? What's changed since 2019 to make it so strategically important?
Well, one major factor is the changing landscape of the Arctic itself. Climate change is melting the ice, opening up new shipping routes, and making resource extraction far more feasible.
Right.
And Greenland, with its location,
right
in the heart of the Arctic and its wealth of resources, suddenly looks a lot more appealing.
It's interesting because you have these untapped reserves of rare earth minerals, oil, gas, uranium.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on and on.
It does.
All this stuff that's critical for everything from, high-tech industries to energy production. I mean, it's almost like the Arctic is becoming this 21st century gold rush, but instead of individual prospectors, you have these nation states all vying for control.
Well, there are certainly parallels.
Yeah.
But there's also a key difference.
Okay.
In a traditional gold rush, it's a race to grab as much as you can.
Right.
As quickly as possible.
Right.
But in the Arctic, we're seeing a more complex game.
Right.
Playing out, you have countries like Russia flexing their military muscle, establishing bases, asserting territorial claim.
And then you have China kind of coming in from a completely different angle.
Completely different approach, yeah.
Really investing heavily in research and infrastructure and almost trying to position themselves as partners rather than, these aggressors.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different approach to, say, Russia's kind of, might makes, right?
Yeah, a far cry from Russia's approach, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to see these different, these global powers kind of all coming at this from their different angles.
It is, and I think, everyone is trying to carve out their own piece of the Arctic pie.
Exactly, and that's where Greenland finds itself, right in the middle of all this.
Well, it's smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, how do you assert your sovereignty and your own interests?
Right.
When you have all these different, behemoths, all these superpowers.
Exactly.
All kind of, vying for your attention.
Yeah, courting you, pressuring you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tricky position to be in.
So what was their response then, to Trump's proposition?
Well, the response from both Denmark and Greenland was a resounding no.
Yeah.
They stood together, making it crystal clear that Greenland was not for sale.
It was a pretty, unified front.
It was.
I mean, Greenland's premier, Mute Ed Hody, he put it pretty forcefully. He said, quote, "Greenland belongs to us. We are not for sale and will never be for sale."
Powerful statement.
Yeah. And I think that really kind of underscores, this deep-seated commitment to autonomy and self-determination that goes beyond just, simple economic considerations.
It does.
And it's interesting because while Greenland does rely very heavily on Denmark economically,
it does.
There's this fierce pride and determination to chart their own course.
There is.
So how did all this land with the international community? I mean, Trump's actions, especially those, kind of aggressive statements about Greenland's, strategic importance to U.S. national security.
Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly a diplomatic triumph.
Right.
World leaders, including some within the U.S. itself, criticized Trump's approach as being undiplomatic, destabilizing, and disrespectful of Greenland's right to self-determination.
Yeah, you had figures like, Secretary of State Antony Blinken calling the idea of a U.S. acquisition of Greenland obviously not a good idea.
Yeah, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz weighed in as well, emphasizing the importance of respecting national sovereignty.
Right, so clearly it seems like, Trump's approach kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, he ruffled some feathers.
Yeah, but beyond that diplomatic fallout, there's a bigger question here. Did Trump's actions inadvertently strengthen Greenland's resolve for independence, even though it kind of backfired in the short term?
That's a great question, and that's what we'll be exploring next, the historical context of this tug-of-war over Greenland, the internal dynamics of their independence movement, and the very real challenges they face in balancing their desire for self-determination with their economic realities.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Stay tuned.
It's really kind of interesting how this whole situation with Trump brought Greenland's independence movement back into the spotlight.
Yeah.
Even though these overtures were rejected, it seems like they've inadvertently fueled the very movement he was trying to suppress.
Yeah, it's almost like a classic case of unintended consequences.
Right.
But before we dive into the complexities of Greenland's, independence movement, I think it's important to kind of step back and understand a little bit about the historical context of U.S. interest in Greenland.
Yes.
This isn't exactly a new phenomenon.
Not at all. The U.S. has had its eye on Greenland for decades.
Yeah.
In fact, back in 1946, they even offered to buy the island outright from Denmark.
Wow.
And then, of course, there's the whole Cold War era, when Greenland's strategic importance was undeniable.
Especially with the establishment of Thule Air Base.
Exactly. Thule Air Base played a crucial role in monitoring Soviet activities during those very tense years.
Right. So while Trump's approach might have been unconventional, to say the least.
Yeah, a little bit outside the box.
The underlying interest in Greenland has been kind of this consistent thread in U.S. foreign policy.
Absolutely a recurring theme.
Yeah, so that kind of brings us to the present day, where Greenland finds itself at this really interesting crossroads. On the one hand, they have this desire for self-determination, this yearning to control their own destiny.
Right.
But on the other hand, they're facing these very real economic challenges, particularly, with their reliance on Danish subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It is, and it's made even more complicated by the fact that they're now caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug-of-war between global superpowers. I mean, it's not just the U.S. anymore.
Right, it's everybody.
You have Russia expanding its military presence in the Arctic.
Right.
China investing heavily in infrastructure and research.
Yeah.
And everyone's looking at Greenland with these dollar signs in their eyes.
Yeah, it's almost like this new era of colonialism is unfolding.
It is.
But instead of direct military conquest, it's this subtle dance of economic and political influence.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how can Greenland navigate this complex landscape and emerge as a truly self-determining nation?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What are some of the potential pathways for Greenland as they try to assert their autonomy and chart their own course in this increasingly complex world?
Well, one scenario that often gets mentioned is Greenland remaining part of the Kingdom of Denmark.
Okay.
But with significantly increased autonomy.
Okay.
They could leverage their strategic importance to negotiate more favorable economic terms, with Denmark potentially gaining greater control over their resources and even their foreign policy.
So kind of like a gradual shift towards independence within the existing framework?
Exactly.
Okay. It would allow them to maintain some level of economic stability while still, asserting their right to self-governance. But what about those who are pushing for a complete break from Denmark? Do you think full independence is a realistic possibility for Greenland?
It's certainly a possibility, though it would undoubtedly come with its own set of challenges.
Yeah, I imagine.
Remember, Greenland's economy is heavily reliant on Danish subsidies.
Right.
Achieving full independence would mean having to find a way to stand on their own 2 feet economically, which is no easy feat.
Right, and then there's the geopolitical aspect.
Yeah.
Could Greenland, as a newly independent nation, truly navigate the complexities of the Arctic without becoming a pawn in someone else's game?
Right.
I mean, could they resist the pressure from larger, more powerful nations?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it brings up another potential scenario, one that's a bit more unsettling.
Okay.
Greenland getting caught in the crossfire of a larger geopolitical conflict.
Oh, wow.
As tensions between the U.S., Russia, and China continue to escalate, the Arctic could become a flashpoint.
Right.
And Greenland, with its strategic location, would be right in the middle of it.
So instead of peacefully transitioning towards, greater autonomy or independence,
right,
they could become a battleground for a proxy war between global superpowers.
It's a possibility.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
And it's a reminder of how interconnected everything is and how events unfolding, thousands of miles away can have a ripple effect on even the most remote corners of the world.
Absolutely. And it underscores the importance of understanding the nuances of these geopolitical dynamics,
Right.
We can't afford to view the Arctic as just this empty expanse of ice and snow.
Right.
It's a region teeming with resources, strategic importance, and, yes, people who are trying to make sense of their place in this rapidly changing world.
It's easy to get caught up in the high-stakes power plays and forget about the human element.
It is.
But at the end of the day, this is about the lives and futures of the Greenlandic people, their culture, their traditions, their right to determine their own path forward.
And that brings us to another crucial aspect of this whole story, the internal dynamics of Greenland's independence movement.
It's not a monolithic entity. You have a spectrum of opinions.
Right.
Different viewpoints on how quickly independence should be pursued,
right,
what form it should take, and how to balance it with the economic realities.
It would be fascinating to get a better understanding of those internal dynamics.
It would.
What are the main factions within the independence movement? What are their key arguments, and how are they navigating these complex questions of self-determination, economic viability, and geopolitical reality?
It's a story within a story.
Right.
And one that deserves closer examination because ultimately the future of Greenland will be shaped not just by external forces, but by the choices and actions of its own people.
Well, I think we've laid out a pretty comprehensive overview of the complexities surrounding Greenland's future.
I think so.
From Trump's audacious and ultimately unsuccessful bid to buy the island, to the intricate web of geopolitical interests and the internal dynamics of their independence movement, it's a story with many layers.
It is indeed. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's worth posing a question to you, our listener.
Now that you've seen how Greenland sits at the intersection of global power plays, resource competition, and the quest for self-determination, what do you think the future holds for this strategically vital island?
So we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Greenland and geopolitics.
Yeah.
From Trump's overtures to the melting ice caps and everything in between.
Right.
It's clear that this island nation is at a pretty pivotal moment in its history.
It really is. It's a fascinating case study. We've got a region undergoing a dramatic transformation because of climate change.
Yeah.
A global power shift playing out in real time.
Right.
And a population grappling with what it means to be a self-determining nation in the 21st century.
It really is a fascinating confluence of all these different factors.
It is.
But I think for a listener, it's worth asking, why should we care?
Yeah.
Why should this whole Greenland saga matter to someone who, might not live anywhere near the Arctic Circle?
That's a question I often ask myself. And I think there are a few key reasons why this matters, even if you don't have a personal stake in Greenland's future.
Okay.
First and foremost, what's happening in the Arctic is a microcosm of the global climate crisis.
Right. We can't just ignore the fact that the ice caps are melting at an alarming rate.
We can't.
And what happens in the Arctic has a ripple effect.
It does.
On the entire planet.
Exactly. Rising sea levels.
Yeah.
Changing weather patterns. These are global problems that stem from the Arctic's transformation.
Right.
And understanding the dynamics of the region, including the political and economic factors we've been discussing.
Yeah.
Is crucial for tackling climate change on a global scale.
It's a reminder that we're all interconnected, whether we realize it or not.
We are.
But beyond the climate aspect, I think this story highlights something else that's incredibly important, and that's, the right to self-determination.
It does.
The Greenlandic people have made it abundantly clear that they want to have a say in their own destiny They've resisted attempts to be bought, sold, or controlled by outside forces.
Right.
And they're actively working to shape their own future.
They are.
It's inspiring in a way, this small nation standing up to global superpowers and saying, we're not just a piece of land on a map. We're a people.
Exactly.
With our own culture, our own history, and our own vision for the future.
And it's a story that resonates far beyond the Arctic.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that in an increasingly interconnected world, the voices and aspirations of all people must be heard and respected.
Especially when it comes to those who have historically been marginalized or exploited.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Yeah.
So, as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into Greenland, what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listener will walk away with?
Well, I think first, the Arctic is no longer this distant, insignificant region.
All right.
It's a place where the future is being forged, a microcosm of global challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
Second, geopolitics is not a game played on a chessboard. It involves real people, real cultures, and real aspirations. And finally, the quest for self-determination is a powerful force.
Yes.
One that can't be ignored no matter how small the nation or how remote the location.
Beautifully put. And on that note, I want to encourage you, our listener, to continue exploring this topic.
Yes.
Delve deeper into the complexities of Greenland and geopolitics. And perhaps, most importantly, challenge yourself to see the world through a different lens.
The Arctic, with its melting ice and shifting power dynamics, is a stark reminder that the future is uncertain, but it's also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring quest for freedom and self-determination.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring.